The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Madrid's National Conservatory, casting long shadows across the polished marble floors. Rosa Perez moved quietly through the hallway, pushing her cleaning cart ahead of her. At 52, she had spent nearly 15 years working as part of the cleaning staff at one of Spain's most prestigious music schools. Her hands, rough and weathered from years of work, gripped the mop as she began her daily routine. The conservatory was almost empty this early. A few dedicated students practiced scales in distant rooms, the notes floating through the corridors like ghosts. Rosa preferred these quiet mornings when she could work in peace, before the hustle of the day began. "Good morning." "Rosa," called out Gabriela, the front desk receptionist, as she walked in carrying her coffee. "How's that grandson of yours doing?" Rosa's tired face brightened. "Growing too fast. Already 7 and asking for a guitar." She chuckled, shaking her head. "His mother says no until he's older, but I see the music in him. Must run in the family," Gabriela said with a kind smile before heading to her desk. Rosa didn't respond. No one at the conservatory knew about her own relationship with music. How could they? She was just the cleaning lady, invisible most days except when something needed tidying. As she moved to the practice halls, Rosa paused outside room 7, the largest rehearsal space with the grand piano. Inside, a young woman sat playing Chopin, her fingers dancing across the keys with technical precision but little emotion. Rosa listened, leaning slightly on her mop. The girl was talented, certainly, but something was missing. Rosa could feel it. Music had always spoken to Rosa in a way that words never could. Growing up in a tiny village outside Seville, her grandfather had been the local violin player, performing at weddings and fiestas. Though they'd been poor, their small home had always been filled with music. Her grandfather had taught her to sing by ear, his violin guiding her voice through folk songs and old lullabies. "You have a gift, little one," he'd told her, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "A voice like yours should be heard," but life had other plans. Her father died young, school ended early, and work became necessary. Marriage at 19 to a construction worker. 2 children soon after, and then her husband's accident that left him unable to work for years. Rosa's dreams of music faded into lullabies for her children and songs hummed while cooking. Now, decades later, her children grown with families of their own, Rosa found herself surrounded by music again. Though always as an observer, never a participant, the conservatory was her secret joy. While cleaning, she absorbed everything: the techniques the professors taught, the way the students breathed when singing, the posture of the violin players. When alone, she would sometimes hum quietly, testing out the melodies she had heard throughout the day. Rosa moved on to clean the women's bathroom, humming softly to herself. The acoustics were surprisingly good, the sound bouncing off the tiled walls. Lost in the melody, she didn't notice the door open. "That sounds lovely," Rosa jumped, nearly dropping her cleaning supplies. An elderly woman stood there, elegantly dressed with silver hair pulled back in a tight bun. Rosa recognized her as Professor Lucia Ortega, one of the vocal teachers. "I'm sorry," Rosa stammered, feeling her cheeks burn. "I didn't realize anyone was here." "No need to apologize for music," Professor Ortega said, her head tilted slightly. "That was La Paloma, wasn't it?" But with an interesting variation in the bridge. Rosa nodded, surprised the professor had recognized both the folk song and her small improvisation. "My grandfather taught it to me," Rosa explained, then quickly added, "I should get back to work." "Of course." The professor smiled kindly before walking to the sink. As Rosa hurried out, she heard the woman call after her, "You have good breath control." The comment stayed with Rosa all morning, a small glow of pride warming her chest as she worked. By midday, she had reached the East Wing where the individual practice rooms were located. Most were occupied with students preparing for the upcoming spring showcase, a major event where the best students performed for important figures in Spain's music scene. Outside one room, a poster caught her eye. "Community Open Mic Night, all welcome." The conservatory occasionally hosted events where non-students could perform, though Rosa had never attended one. She read the details, 3 weeks away on a Friday evening. Her heart beat a little faster at the thought. Ridiculous, she muttered to herself, moving on. What was she thinking? She wasn't a performer. She was a cleaning lady with no training, no education. The people who studied here had been playing since childhood, had parents who paid for expensive lessons, had natural gifts. But as she cleaned, the seed of an idea had been planted. What if she tried? What was the worst that could happen? That evening, after her shift ended, Rosa took a detour before heading home. The small chapel near the conservatory was usually empty this time of day. She slipped inside, the familiar smell of candle wax and old wood welcoming her. The acoustics here were wonderful. She'd attended her nephew's wedding here years ago and still remembered how the music had soared to the rafters. Checking to make sure she was alone, Rosa stood in the center of the chapel and began to sing. Softly at first, then, with growing confidence, she sang an old Spanish lullaby her grandfather had taught her. Her voice, untrained but naturally rich and warm, filled the space. She closed her eyes, letting the music take her somewhere else, somewhere where she wasn't just a cleaning woman, a grandmother, a widow, but simply a vessel for something beautiful. When she finished, the silence felt heavy. Then a small sound, a shuffle of feet. Rosa's eyes flew open. There in the back pew sat a young man with wide eyes. "I'm sorry," he said quickly, standing up. "I came in to pray and that was amazing." Rosa grabbed her bag, embarrassed. "I should go." "Wait," he called as she hurried toward the door. "Are you a singer? Do you perform anywhere?" She shook her head, not looking back. No, just for myself." All the way home on the bus, Rosa's heart raced. Someone had heard her, really heard her. And they thought she was good. The young man's amazed expression stayed with her as she prepared a simple dinner in her small apartment. The next day at work, Rosa found herself paying even more attention to the vocal students. She lingered outside practice rooms, absorbing techniques, mentally taking notes on breathing, posture, expression. During her lunch break, she slipped into the bathroom and tried to replicate what she'd observed, watching herself in the mirror as she sang quietly. "You should sign up," a voice said, making her jump for the second time in 2 days. It was Professor Ortega again, smiling at Rosa's startled expression. "Sign up?" Rosa asked, confused. "For the community showcase," the professor explained, pointing to her reflection in the mirror. "You were practicing, weren't you?" Rosa shook her head quickly. "Oh no, I couldn't. I was just—" "It's nothing." Professor Ortega studied her for a moment. "You know, I've been teaching voice for 43 years. I can recognize talent when I hear it, even untrained talent, perhaps especially untrained talent. I'm just the cleaning lady," Rosa said softly, looking down at her worn uniform. "And Ella Fitzgerald was just an orphan girl on the streets before someone heard her sing." Professor Ortega's voice was kind but firm. "Music doesn't care what job you have." Before Rosa could respond, the professor had left, the door swinging closed behind her. Rosa stared at her own reflection, seeing the lines around her eyes, the gray strands in her dark hair, the weariness that years of hard work had etched into her face. Could she really do it? Perform in front of people? In front of the very musicians and students she cleaned up after? The thought was terrifying. And yet, something inside her, something that had been quiet for so very long, whispered, "Why not?" That night, Rosa took the sign-up sheet from the bulletin board, folded it carefully, and put it in her pocket. She didn't fill it out, not yet. But it was a start, a possibility, a door slightly ajar. As she rode the bus home, watching the lights of Madrid blur past the window, Rosa hummed quietly to herself. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to dream. 2 days had passed since Rosa took the sign-up sheet for the community showcase. It remained folded in her pocket, a small weight she carried with her through her cleaning shifts. Each time she reached for her phone or keys, her fingers brushed against the paper, reminding her of the decision she hadn't yet made. "You seem distracted today," Gabriella commented as Rosa mopped near the front desk, going over the same spot 3 times. "Everything okay at home?" Rosa straightened up. Yes, just thinking too much." "Dangerous habit," Gabriella teased. Her phone rang and she turned away to answer it, leaving Rosa alone with her thoughts once more. The morning stretched on as Rosa moved through her usual routine. As she approached the main rehearsal hall, she heard raised voices. Curious, she slowed her cart. Absolutely unacceptable. The voice was deep, commanding, unmistakable. Maestro Diego Vega, the most famous conductor at the conservatory and possibly in all of Spain. "We are 3 weeks from the showcase." 3 weeks? "And this is what you bring me?" Rosa peered through the partially open door. The full orchestra sat in silence, instruments in hand. A young cellist in the front row looked close to tears. The maestro paced in front of them, his silver hair wild, his hands gesturing dramatically in the air. From the beginning. Again, he commanded, tapping his baton sharply against the music stand. And this time, remember you are playing Mahler, not background music for a shopping center. Rosa should have moved on. She had bathrooms to clean, trash to collect. But something held her there, watching the orchestra begin again. The music swelled rich and complex. Even to her untrained ear, it sounded beautiful, though perhaps not perfect. Maestro Vega stopped them again after only 30 seconds. No, no, no. He threw his baton down in frustration. Where is the emotion? Where is the heart? You play the notes but miss the music entirely. The young cellist in the front wiped a tear. Rosa felt a surge of protectiveness. She had seen this girl practice for hours, arriving early, leaving late. Now the poor thing was being humiliated in front of everyone. The maestro noticed the tear. If you cannot handle criticism, perhaps music is not for you. This is not a hobby. This is art. This is life. Rosa had heard rumors about Maestro Vega's temper, his exacting standards. He had studied in Vienna, conducted orchestras across Europe, won countless awards. His talent was undeniable. His kindness, however, seemed in short supply. Suddenly the maestro looked toward the door. Who is there? Come in or go away, but do not lurk. Rosa froze. She considered hurrying away but knew he had spotted her. Reluctantly, she pushed her cart into the rehearsal hall. Sorry to disturb, she said quietly. I was just passing. Maestro Vega frowned. Ah, the cleaning staff. Well, perhaps you can tell us what you thought of our performance. Rosa looked up, startled. Was he mocking her? His expression gave nothing away. I'm just here to clean, sir, she said, trying to move along the edge of the room. No, I insist. He gestured expansively. We have an audience now. A fresh ear. Tell us what you heard. The orchestra members shifted uncomfortably. A few exchanged glances. The young cellist stared at her lap. It sounded beautiful to me, Rosa said simply. The maestro's eyebrows shot up. Beautiful? That's all, just beautiful? Rosa should have left it there, but something about his dismissive tone bothered her. The first violin seemed a bit rushed in the opening section, she found herself saying. And perhaps the brass was too dominant in the middle part. A stunned silence fell over the room. The maestro's expression shifted from surprise to amusement. Well, our cleaning lady is a music critic now. He laughed, and a few nervous titters spread through the orchestra. And what conservatory did you attend? What great orchestras have you conducted? Rosa's cheeks burned. None, sir. I just listen while I work. She listens while she works, he repeated, his voice dripping with sarcasm. 50 years of musical study, and I am corrected by a woman who pushes a mop. The laughter grew louder. Rosa clutched the handle of her cart, wishing she could disappear. Tell me, he continued, walking toward her. Do you play an instrument? No, perhaps you sing then. Are you a hidden diva among us? Rosa didn't answer. The sign-up sheet felt like it was burning a hole in her pocket. Come now, don't be shy, the maestro insisted. If you can critique my orchestra, surely you can share your talents with us. I should go, Rosa whispered. I have work to do. Oh yes, very important work. The maestro turned back to his orchestra. Let's not keep her from her mop and bucket. After all, we each have our place in the world, don't we? Some of us create art, others clean up after us. More laughter followed. Rosa pushed her cart quickly toward the door, her vision blurring with unshed tears. As she reached the hallway, she heard the maestro call out one last time. If you decide to perform at the community showcase, do let us know. We could all use some entertainment. Rosa practically ran from the rehearsal hall, not stopping until she reached the janitor's closet. She shut the door behind her and finally let the tears fall. Her hands shook as she reached into her pocket and pulled out the sign-up sheet, now crumpled and damp with sweat. What had she been thinking? This world wasn't for people like her. She had been foolish to even consider it. With trembling fingers, she tore the sign-up sheet into tiny pieces and dropped them into the trash bin. For the rest of the day, Rosa kept her head down and worked in silence. She avoided the rehearsal halls, taking detours through the building to stay away from anywhere the maestro might be. She felt small, insignificant, like she had been reminded of her proper place in the hierarchy of the world. When her shift ended, Rosa changed out of her uniform quickly, eager to leave the building. As she walked toward the exit, she heard beautiful singing coming from one of the practice rooms. Almost without thinking, she paused to listen. A soprano voice, clear and powerful, sang an aria Rosa recognized from one of the operas her grandfather had loved. The voice belonged to Professor Ortega's star student, a young woman named Pilar, who was rumored to be destined for the great opera houses of Europe. Rosa closed her eyes, letting the music wash over her. Despite her humiliation, despite her resolve to forget this foolish dream, she couldn't help but be moved. The voice conveyed such longing, such hope. It reached inside her and touched something deep and true. Beautiful, isn't she? Rosa's eyes snapped open. Professor Ortega stood beside her, also listening to the student practice. Yes, Rosa agreed softly. Very beautiful. I was hoping to see your name on the showcase list, the professor said, giving Rosa a questioning look. Rosa shook her head. I threw away the form. 'Twas a silly idea. Why silly? Because I don't belong here, Rosa said, the words catching in her throat. I'm just the cleaning lady. Professor Ortega frowned. Did something happen? Rosa looked away, unwilling to complain or cause trouble. It doesn't matter. I need to get home. Wait. The professor touched her arm gently. Rosa, talent doesn't care about titles or positions. I meant what I said before. You have a gift. You haven't even really heard me sing, Rosa protested. I've heard enough, and I trust my ears more than most. The professor reached into her bag and pulled out another sign-up form. Take this. The deadline is tomorrow. Think about it overnight. Rosa reluctantly took the paper, though she had no intention of filling it out. And Rosa, Professor Ortega added as Rosa turned to leave. Not everyone here is like Maestro Vega. Rosa's head snapped up. How did you— The walls have ears, Professor Ortega said with a sad smile, and his voice carries when he's being cruel. I'm sorry you experienced that. Rosa nodded, unable to speak around the lump in her throat. His opinion is not the only one that matters, the professor continued. Sometimes the greatest music comes from the most unexpected places. That night, Rosa sat at her small kitchen table, the new sign-up form in front of her. She traced the blank line where her name should go. The maestro's mocking voice echoed in her mind. Some of us create art. Others clean up after us. She picked up a pen, then put it down again. What was the point? She would only embarrass herself further. Her phone rang, startling her. It was her daughter calling to chat about her grandson's school play. He was so nervous, Mama, her daughter said. He wanted to run off the stage. But I told him what you always told me, that being scared doesn't mean you can't do something. It just means it matters to you. After they hung up, Rosa stared at her own words, repeated back to her through her daughter. Had she really become the sort of person who let fear stop her? Who let someone else's opinion define what she could do? Slowly, she picked up the pen again. This time, she didn't put it down until she had signed her name. Rosa arrived at work early the next morning, the completed sign-up form clutched in her hand. Her heart pounded as she approached the bulletin board near the main office. Several students milled about, chatting excitedly about weekend plans and upcoming exams. None of them paid any attention to the older woman in the cleaning uniform, standing hesitantly before the board. With a deep breath, Rosa pinned her form to the board, among dozens of others. For a moment, she stared at her name, written in her careful handwriting. Then, before she could change her mind, she turned away and hurried to the janitor's closet to begin her shift. All day, as she mopped floors and emptied trash cans, Rosa wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. What would she sing? How would she practice? Where would she find the courage to stand on a stage? The question swirled in her mind, making her hands tremble slightly as she worked. Rosa? A gentle voice interrupted her thoughts. She looked up to find Professor Ortega standing in the hallway outside the bathroom Rosa was cleaning. I saw your name on the sign-up sheet. I'm glad you reconsidered, Rosa nodded, embarrassed. I don't know what I was thinking. You were thinking that you have something to share, the professor said simply. And you do. She glanced at her watch. Are you free after your shift today? We could talk about your performance and talk, Rosa repeated, confused. Well, we need to choose a song, don't we? And discuss how you'll prepare. The professor smiled. Unless you've already decided what you'll perform? Rosa shook her head. The thought hadn't even occurred to her yet. I don't know any proper songs. Just old folk tunes and things I've heard around here. That's a start, Professor Ortega said. Meet me in practice room 12 at 6 o'clock after your shift. It's at the end of the east corridor, usually empty this time of year. Before Rosa could protest, the professor was gone, her heels clicking down the hallway. Rosa stared after her, wondering what she had gotten herself into. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Rosa cleaned on autopilot, her mind elsewhere. At 5:30, she finished her duties and changed out of her uniform in the small employee bathroom. She had brought a simple blouse and pants to change into, never imagining she would be meeting with one of the conservatory's most respected vocal teachers. Practice room 12 was small but well-appointed, with a baby grand piano and large windows that let in the evening light. Professor Ortega was already there when Rosa arrived, arranging some sheet music on the piano. Come in, she called when she saw Rosa hovering in the doorway. Let's get started. Professor, Rosa began, twisting her hands nervously. I appreciate your help, but I'm not sure this is a good idea. I have no training, no experience. Which is why I'm here, the professor interrupted gently. To help you prepare. Now tell me what songs you know well enough to sing without music. Reluctantly, Rosa listed a few folk songs, lullabies, and traditional Spanish ballads her grandfather had taught her. Professor Ortega nodded, occasionally jotting notes. And what have you picked up from listening around here? She asked. Rosa hesitated, then mentioned a few pieces she had heard students practicing. An aria from La Bohème, a piece from a Mozart Requiem, a Spanish art song that one of the vocal students sang often. Interesting, Professor Ortega murmured. Would you feel comfortable singing something for me now? Just so I can hear your voice properly? Rosa's throat went dry. Here, now. Just us two, the professor assured her. Think of it as a private concert. After a moment's hesitation, Rosa nodded. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and began to sing a lullaby her grandmother had sung to her as a child. The same one she had later sung to her own children. Her voice started soft, uncertain. But as the familiar melody wrapped around her, she gained confidence. The simple song spoke of stars and dreams and a mother's love, timeless and true. When she finished, Rosa opened her eyes to see Professor Ortega watching her with an unreadable expression. I'm sorry, Rosa said quickly. I know it's not very good. Not good, the professor repeated. Rosa, you have a rare gift. Your voice has a natural warmth and authenticity that many trained singers would envy. She tapped her pen against her notes. It's untrained, yes. Your breathing needs work, and your higher register is undeveloped. But the foundation is extraordinary. Rosa stared at her, unable to believe what she was hearing. We have just under 3 weeks, the professor continued. All business now. Not much time, but enough to prepare one piece properly. I think, she rifled through her sheet music. Yes, this one. She pulled out a piece of music. An art song by Enrique Granados. It's in Spanish, the range suits you, and the emotion fits your voice perfectly. Rosa took the music with trembling hands. But I don't read music. Then I'll teach you by ear, Professor Ortega said simply. You'll need to practice every day. Can you come here after your shifts? Rosa thought about her small apartment where practicing would disturb the neighbors. She thought about her limited free time, her aching feet at the end of each day. Then she thought about the maestro's mocking face, and something hardened inside her. Yes, she said firmly. Every day. And so began the most exhausting, exhilarating 3 weeks of Rosa's life. Each day followed the same pattern. Work her regular shift cleaning the conservatory, then spend 2 hours with Professor Ortega, learning the song note by note, phrase by phrase. The professor was kind but demanding, making Rosa repeat sections until they were perfect, teaching her breathing techniques and how to support her voice properly. Think of your breath as the foundation of a building, she explained. Everything rests upon it. Without proper support, the structure will collapse. On days when the professor had other commitments, Rosa practiced alone in the chapel near the conservatory. She practiced at home too, singing quietly in her kitchen while preparing dinner, running through the lyrics in her head during her bus ride to work. The song became part of her, its melody humming in her veins as she mopped floors and scrubbed toilets, the other cleaning. Staff noticed the change in her. You're different lately, her coworker Luis commented one day as they ate lunch together in the break room. Always humming, always rushing off after work. You got a boyfriend or something? Rosa laughed, nearly choking on her sandwich. No, nothing like that. Then what? You've got a secret, I can tell. Rosa hesitated, then decided to trust him. I'm performing in the community showcase next week. Luis's eyes widened. You? Singing? She nodded, suddenly shy. Well, I'll be there, he declared, slapping the table. Front row. The whole cleaning staff will come. We'll cheer louder than anyone. The news spread quickly among her co-workers. To Rosa's surprise, they were supportive, even proud. Gabriella at the front desk gave her a small brooch to wear for luck. The maintenance man offered to fix a wobbly step on her apartment stairs so you don't fall and hurt yourself before the big day. A week before the showcase, disaster struck. Rosa arrived at practice room 12 to find a note from Professor Ortega. Emergency faculty meeting. Practice scales for 30 minutes, then work on measures 15:30. L.O. Disappointed but determined, Rosa let herself into the room and began her warm-up exercises. She was halfway through her scales when the door burst open. What are you doing in here? Maestro Vega demanded, his imposing figure filling the doorway. These rooms are for students and faculty only. Rosa froze mid-note. Professor Ortega gave me permission, she managed to say. We've been working together for the showcase. The maestro's eyebrows shot up. You're actually going through with this? The cleaning lady is going to perform? His tone made it clear what he thought of the idea. Rosa lifted her chin, summoning her courage. Yes, she said simply. I am, he laughed, a short, harsh sound. Well, I suppose everyone needs hobbies. Even cleaning ladies. He gave her a dismissive glance. Don't get your hopes up. The showcase may be open to the community, but the standards are still high. As he turned to leave, Rosa found her voice again. Why do you dislike me so much? She asked. What have I ever done to you? The maestro paused, seeming genuinely surprised by the question. Dislike you? I don't dislike you. I don't think about you at all. He shrugged. You clean the floors. I conduct orchestras. Our worlds don't intersect. They do now, Rosa said quietly. He studied her for a long moment. So it seems. Well, good luck with your performance. The way he said the word made it clear he expected a disaster. I'll be in the audience. Try not to embarrass yourself too badly. After he left, Rosa sat down heavily on the piano bench, her hands shaking. Would he be right? Would she embarrass herself? Make a fool of herself in front of the entire conservatory? Then she remembered Professor Ortega's words. The foundation is extraordinary. She remembered her daughter repeating her own advice. Being scared doesn't mean you can't do something. It just means it matters to you. Slowly, Rosa stood up, squared her shoulders, and began to sing again. Measure by measure, note by note, she reclaimed her courage, her voice growing stronger with each phrase. She would be ready. No matter what the maestro thought, no matter how scared she felt, she would stand on that stage and sing her heart out. For herself, for her grandfather who had first recognized her gift, for Professor Ortega who believed in her, and yes, even for the maestro who thought she had no place in his world of music. The stage awaited. And Rosa Perez, cleaning lady and singer, would be ready. The day of the showcase arrived with golden autumn sunshine streaming through Madrid's streets. Rosa woke before her alarm, her stomach twisted into knots. She had barely slept, running through the song in her mind all night, imagining everything that could go wrong. She arrived at work earlier than usual, hoping the familiar routine of cleaning would calm her nerves. The conservatory hummed with unusual energy. Students rushing about with instrument cases, faculty members conferring in corners, maintenance staff setting up extra chairs in the performance hall. There she is, Luis called when he spotted Rosa in the hallway. Our star performer. Rosa shushed him, embarrassed. Don't say that. I'm just part of the community showcase, nothing special. Nothing special? Luis scoffed. First cleaning staff member ever to perform in the showcase. That's historic. You'll make her more nervous, Gabriella scolded, appearing from the front office. She squeezed Rosa's hand. You'll be wonderful. Just breathe. Rosa nodded gratefully and hurried to start her work. She had taken the afternoon off, her first time requesting leave in 3 years, to prepare for the evening performance. The morning stretched before her, each minute crawling by with excruciating slowness. As she cleaned the women's bathroom near the practice rooms, the door swung open. Pilar, Professor Ortega's star student, walked in. She nodded politely at Rosa, then did a double-take. You're performing tonight, aren't you? She asked, washing her hands. Professor Ortega mentioned she's been coaching someone from the staff. Rosa nodded, surprised the famous student knew about her. What will you be singing? Pilar asked. Granados. El Majo Discreto, Rosa replied, naming the Spanish art song she had been practicing for weeks. Pilar's eyebrows rose. That's not easy. The phrasing is tricky. She dried her hands and turned to face Rosa fully. Are you nervous? Terrified, Rosa admitted with a small laugh. To her surprise, Pilar smiled. Me too, every time, even after all these years. But you're so good, Rosa blurted out. I've heard you practice. Your voice is beautiful. Thank you, Pilar said, looking genuinely pleased. Stage fright never completely goes away, you know. My teacher, Professor Ortega, she says that's a good thing. It keeps us honest. She paused at the door. Good luck tonight. I'll be watching. The brief exchange left Rosa feeling strangely comforted. If someone as talented as Pilar still got nervous, perhaps her own fear was normal, even necessary. By noon, Rosa had finished her duties. She changed out of her uniform in the staff bathroom and carefully hung it in her locker. She had brought a simple dress to wear, dark blue, modest, with 3/4 sleeves. Nothing fancy, but the nicest thing she owned. As she prepared to leave for a few hours, Professor Ortega found her. There you are, the professor said. How are you feeling? Like I might throw up, Rosa confessed. Professor Ortega laughed. Perfectly normal. Listen, I want you to go home and rest your voice completely. No talking, no humming, nothing. Drink warm water with honey and lemon. Come back at 6 for a brief warm-up, then the showcase begins at 7. Rosa nodded, her throat too tight to speak. And Rosa, the professor added gently, remember why you're doing this. Not for me, not for anyone in the audience. For yourself and for the music. The hours at home passed in a blur of anxiety and anticipation. Rosa tried to nap but couldn't settle. She drank the honey and lemon water, steamed her face over a bowl of hot water to clear her sinuses as Professor Ortega had taught her, and gently stretched her neck and shoulders to release tension. Her daughter called, wishing her luck. Mama, I'm so proud of you. We all are. Miguel wanted to come, but it's past his bedtime. I promised we'd record it on my phone. Don't, Rosa said quickly. I don't want it recorded. If I make a fool of myself, you won't, her daughter interrupted firmly. But we won't record if you don't want us to. Just know we're all thinking of you. At 5:30, Rosa put on her dress, applied a touch of lipstick, and pinned Gabriella's brooch to her collar. She looked at herself in the mirror, an ordinary woman in her 50s with streaks of gray in her dark hair and lines around her eyes. Not a performer, not a trained musician, just Rosa. You can do this, she whispered to her reflection. Then she headed back to the conservatory. The building looked different in the evening light, transformed from a place of work to a place of celebration, with small vases of flowers adorning the entry tables and programs stacked neatly by the doors to the performance hall. Rosa slipped in through a side entrance, not wanting to encounter the early arrivals already milling about the lobby. Professor Ortega was waiting in practice room 12 as promised. She led Rosa through gentle warm-ups, helping her find her voice and her center. Remember, the audience wants you to succeed, the professor said. They're on your side. Connect with the emotion of the song, not with your fear. All too soon it was time. Rosa followed Professor Ortega to the backstage area, where other community performers waited nervously. There were 12 acts in total, a mix of singers, instrumentalists, and one poetry recitation. Rosa was scheduled 9th, near the end of the program. Good placement, the professor whispered. The audience will be settled in, receptive. From behind the curtain, Rosa could hear the hall filling, the murmur of voices growing as seats were taken. She peeked through a small gap and felt her heart sink. The hall was nearly full. Worse, she could see Maestro Vega in the 3rd row. His silver hair unmistakable, surrounded by faculty members. He's here, she whispered to Professor Ortega, her voice tight with panic. The professor squeezed her hand. Good. Let him hear what real music sounds like. The showcase began. Rosa watched the first performers, trying to calm her racing heart. A teenage boy played violin beautifully. An elderly man sang an operatic aria with a surprisingly powerful voice. A middle-aged woman played a complex piece on the piano. The audience applauded warmly for each. Some performances were better than others, but all were received with kindness. Rosa began to breathe a little easier. Perhaps this wouldn't be so terrible after all. Then it was time for the eighth performer, the act before hers. As the young man took his place at the piano, Rosa moved closer to the stage entrance. Her hands were ice cold, her mouth dry. "Breathe from your diaphragm," Professor Ortega reminded her softly. "Remember everything we practiced." The pianist finished to enthusiastic applause. The stage manager gestured to Rosa. It was time. Rosa stepped onto the stage, blinking in the bright lights. The audience appeared as a dark mass beyond the footlights. She walked to the center mark where a microphone stood waiting. Professor Ortega had arranged to accompany her on piano, and now took her place at the grand piano to Rosa's right. "Our next performer," the announcer's voice said, "is Rosa Perez singing El Majo Discreto by Enrique Granados." A murmur rippled through the audience. Rosa could imagine what they were saying. "Isn't she one of the cleaning staff? What is she doing on stage?" Her legs trembled so badly she feared they might give way. She glanced at Professor Ortega, who gave her an encouraging nod and began the piano introduction. The familiar notes washed over Rosa. She closed her eyes briefly, letting the music fill her. Then she began to sing. The first notes were shaky, uncertain. But as she continued, something shifted inside her. The weeks of practice took over. Her voice found its strength, its natural warmth emerging as she sang the Spanish art song about a discreet lover who keeps his lady's secrets. The audience faded away. The maestro, the conservatory, her fears all disappeared. There was only the music, flowing through her like a river, carrying her along. She sang of love and loyalty, her voice rising and falling with the emotion of the piece, her hands gently emphasizing certain phrases as Professor Ortega had taught her. As she reached the climax of the song, Rosa opened her eyes and looked directly at the audience for the first time. Through the light, she could make out faces now. Her co-workers in the back row, students she recognized from the hallways, and yes, Maestro Vega, sitting stiffly in his seat, his expression unreadable. Rosa held the final note, letting it soar to the rafters of the hall, then fade gently away. In the moment of silence that followed, she felt a profound sense of peace. Whatever happened next, she had done it. She had stood on this stage and sung with all her heart. The silence stretched for 1 second, then 2. Rosa's peace began to crumble. Had she failed? Had it been as bad as she feared? Then from the back of the hall, she heard a single person begin to clap. Then another joined in, and another. Suddenly, the entire audience erupted in applause. Not just polite clapping, but enthusiastic, with cheers and whistles from the back where her fellow staff members sat. Rosa stood frozen, unable to process the reaction. The applause continued, growing louder. To her astonishment, she saw movement in the audience as people began to rise from their seats. First a few, then entire rows, until the whole hall was giving her a standing ovation. Through tear-blurred eyes, Rosa searched for the maestro. He remained seated, but she could see even from a distance that his expression had changed. He was staring at her with something that looked almost like shock. Professor Ortega came to stand beside her, taking her hand and raising it high. "Take your bow," she whispered. "You've earned it." Rosa bowed deeply, her heart overflowing with gratitude and joy. As she straightened, she caught the maestro's eye again. For the briefest moment, their gazes locked. Then slowly, almost reluctantly, he too rose to his feet and joined the standing ovation. It was, without doubt, the most extraordinary moment of Rosa Perez's life. The applause seemed to last forever. Even as Rosa made her way off the stage, legs shaking, the audience continued clapping. In the wings, Professor Ortega embraced her. "You did it," she whispered fiercely. "You were magnificent." Rosa couldn't speak. The emotion was too raw, too overwhelming. She had spent her life cleaning up after others, being invisible. Now hundreds of people had seen her, really seen her, and what's more, they had valued what they saw. She found a quiet corner backstage and sank onto a chair, trying to catch her breath. The final 3 performers would take their turns, then the showcase would end. Rosa wasn't sure what would happen next. She only knew that something fundamental had shifted inside her. The remaining performances passed in a blur. Before she knew it, the showcase was over and people were filing out of the hall. Rosa remained hidden backstage, unsure whether to join the crowd in the lobby or slip out a side exit. She wasn't ready to face anyone yet, especially not, "Excuse me." A deep voice interrupted her thoughts. Rosa looked up to see Maestro Vega standing before her, his expression unreadable. Her heart sank. Had he come to mock her again? To explain away the audience's reaction as mere politeness? Your performance, he began, then cleared his throat. Your performance was unexpected. Rosa waited, bracing herself. I owe you an apology, he continued, the words seeming to cost him considerable effort. I made assumptions based on nothing of relevance. I was wrong. Rosa stared at him. Of all the outcomes she had imagined for this evening, the Maestro apologizing had never crossed her mind. The Granados piece is challenging, he went on, sounding more like himself now, analytical and precise. Your interpretation was unorthodox but effective. Your phrasing in the middle section particularly. Most singers rush it, but you gave it room to breathe. Thank you, Rosa said softly. The Maestro nodded stiffly. You have a natural gift, raw, untrained, but authentic. He paused, seeming to struggle with something. The conservatory has a program for adult students, working people. Classes in the evenings and on weekends. You should consider it. With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Rosa speechless for the second time that evening. Before she could process what had happened, her co-workers descended upon her, whooping and cheering. Luis lifted her right off her feet in an exuberant hug. Did you hear them? A standing ovation, he crowed. And did you see the Maestro's face? He looked like he'd swallowed a lemon. Gabriella hugged her next. We're so proud of you. So proud. Rosa found herself surrounded by people, other performers congratulating her, students she recognized from the hallways, even a few faculty members nodding approvingly. Professor Ortega appeared at her side, slipping an arm through Rosa's. Come, she said quietly. You need some air? It's a lot to take in. They made their way through the crowd, Professor Ortega gracefully deflecting people who wanted to speak to Rosa. Outside, the night was cool and clear, stars visible even through Madrid's city lights. Rosa took a deep breath, feeling the tension begin to leave her body. What happens now? She asked, her voice small in the darkness. Professor Ortega smiled. Whatever you want to happen. This can be a wonderful memory, a story to tell your grandchildren, or it can be a beginning. The Maestro mentioned a program for adult students, Rosa said hesitantly. The continuing education program, yes. It's designed for people who work full-time but want to study music formally. The professor looked at her carefully. Is that something you'd be interested in? Rosa thought about it. Classes would mean less time with her family, more pressure on top of her already physically demanding job. It would be difficult, perhaps even more difficult than preparing for this one performance had been. I don't know, she admitted. It seems impossible. Many things seem impossible until they're done, Professor Ortega replied. Like a cleaning lady bringing an entire concert hall to its feet. Rosa smiled at that. I'll think about it. Her daughter was waiting at home, bursting with curiosity and pride. How was it? Tell me everything, she demanded the moment Rosa walked through the door. Over a late cup of tea, Rosa described the evening, the nerves, the music, the standing ovation, even the Maestro's surprising apology. Her daughter listened, eyes wide. Mama, this is amazing, she said when Rosa had finished. You must feel so vindicated. It's strange, Rosa replied slowly. I thought I wanted to prove him wrong, to show everyone I belonged on that stage. But when I was singing, I wasn't thinking about any of that. I was just happy to be making something beautiful. Her daughter reached across the table and squeezed her hand. That's why they stood for you. They could feel it. The next morning, Rosa returned to the conservatory, broom and mop in hand as usual. She had half expected things to be different, but the building looked the same. Practice rooms needed cleaning. Trash bins needed emptying. Life went on, but small things had changed. Students smiled and nodded as she passed. A violinist practicing in a corner room paused to tell her he'd enjoyed her performance. The receptionist brought her coffee for our star. At lunchtime, Rosa found Professor Ortega waiting for her in the break room, a folder in her hands. Application forms, the professor explained, sliding them across the table, for the continuing education program. The deadline is next week. No pressure, just an option. Rosa took the folder. Thank you. I'm still thinking about it. Of course. The professor stood to leave, then paused. Whatever you decide, your voice deserves to be heard, Rosa, in whatever way works for your life. As the professor left, Rosa opened the folder and looked at the forms inside. tuition information, class schedules, requirements. It was intimidating. And yet, she tucked the folder into her bag and finished her lunch. There was work to do. The afternoon found her cleaning the main rehearsal hall. The orchestra was scheduled to practice there later, but for now it was empty and peaceful. Rosa worked methodically, her mind drifting between memories of the previous night and thoughts about the future. The sound of the door opening made her look up. Maestro Vega walked in, folders of music under his arm. He stopped when he saw her. "Rosa," he acknowledged with a nod. "Maestro," she replied, continuing her work. He set his materials on the conductor's stand, then turned to her again. "Have you considered what I mentioned? About the adult education program?" Rosa straightened up. "I'm looking into it." "Good." He shuffled his papers, seemingly uncomfortable. "You would need a scholarship, I imagine. The conservatory has a few available for promising students with financial need." Rosa's hand stilled on her mop. "Are you offering to help me get a scholarship, Maestro?" He looked at her directly for the first time. "I am offering to write a recommendation, yes. Your talent deserves development." The same words Professor Ortega had used, deserves. Not a gift to be granted by others, but something that was rightfully hers, waiting to be claimed. "Thank you," Rosa said simply. "I'll let you know my decision." The maestro nodded and returned to organizing his music. Rosa finished mopping and wheeled her cart toward the door. "Rosa," the maestro called after her. She turned. "Regardless of what you choose, you reminded me of something important last night." "What's that?" she asked. "That music belongs to everyone, not just to those of us who have spent our lives studying it." His expression softened slightly. "Sometimes we forget that." Over the next few days, Rosa thought deeply about her options. She discussed it with her family, with Professor Ortega, even with her fellow cleaning staff. The consensus was clear: she should apply for the program. "But it will be so much work," Rosa protested to her daughter. "Classes after long days of cleaning, homework, practice, and I'm not young anymore." "Age doesn't matter," her daughter replied firmly. "Passion does, and you've got plenty of that." In the end, Rosa submitted her application, complete with recommendations from both Professor Ortega and, remarkably, Maestro Vega. When the acceptance letter arrived, along with news of a partial scholarship, she cried tears of joy and terror. Life changed slowly but surely. Rosa continued cleaning at the conservatory, but now she also attended evening classes twice a week. She learned to read music, to understand theory, to train her voice properly. It was exhausting and exhilarating in equal measure. 6 months after the showcase, the conservatory held a small recital for the adult education students. Rosa performed again, this time with more technique but the same authentic emotion that had moved the audience before. Her fellow students, a bank teller who played clarinet, a bus driver studying piano, a nurse learning violin, cheered her on. Maestro Vega attended that recital too, sitting quietly in the back row. Afterward, he approached Rosa with something almost like warmth. "You've been working hard," he observed. "It shows." "Thank you," Rosa said, standing taller than she once had in his presence. "Your next piece should be something more challenging," he suggested. "Perhaps the fala set we discussed in masterclass last month," Rosa smiled. "I'm working on it already." As the maestro walked away, Professor Ortega appeared at Rosa's side. "Look at you," she said softly. "Not a cleaning lady singing anymore. Just a singer. Who also cleans," Rosa added with a laugh. "For now," the professor said with a mysterious smile. Rosa didn't know what the future held. Perhaps she would always clean the conservatory by day and study music by night. Perhaps opportunities would arise that she couldn't yet imagine. What she knew for certain was that she had found her voice. Not just her singing voice, but her true self, the part of her that had been silent for too long, and that voice deserved to be heard.